Okay, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the first in our current series of Q&A sessions. My name is John Dove, and I am the founder of the National Speed Mooting Competition. Tonight we have a very exciting panel. So this is the solicitor session. So we have a panel of solicitors, trainees, and future trainees who will be answering your questions in relation to a career as a solicitor. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to turn to our panelists one by one to give them each the opportunity to introduce themselves to you and just say which firm they work for and what their practice area is. So we'll start with Emanuele Santella.
Hi everyone, my name is Emanuele. I'm a trainee solicitor at BLM. I'm currently in my third seat. I'm focusing on construction, and so far I've done personal injury on the insurance litigation side, as well as occupational disease. And possibly in my last seat, I would probably do something concerning professional indemnity if I get the seat.
Thanks. Next, we have Lindsey Bartling.
Hi, everyone. I am 15 years qualified, which I realised today and gave me a bit of a shock. I've had quite a varied career. I qualified into criminal law, criminal defence, and used to go to police stations at 3 o'clock in the morning and then back to court at 9 o'clock the next day. I then was able to switch to civil, and I did fraud and personal injury cases and worked on the defence side. And now I work at BLM. So I'm an associate at BLM. I work in the catastrophic injury team and work alongside some of the partners on the most high value cases.
Thank you. Next we have Danny Greenland.
Hi everyone, thanks John. I'm Danny. I'm currently an associate in the TNT team at Linklaters London office. But before that I trained and qualified at a much smaller regional practice called Brabner's in Liverpool.
Thank you. Next we have Danielle Carter.
Hi everyone, I'm an Associate Director and Solicitor in Jackson Lee's group in Liverpool. I specialise in court of protection and I'm coming up 7 years qualified. I've done court protection work the whole time.
Thank you. And next we have Richard Briggs.
Good evening everyone, I'm a Senior Associate Solicitor at Irwin Mitchell based in Manchester. I deal with complex serious injury cases, acting for claimants who have been catastrophically injured, particularly in the field of brain injury, amputation work and spinal cord injuries.
Oh, wow.
And lastly, we have Andrew Ball.
Hi everyone, I'm Andrew. I'm a paralegal currently at Weightmans in the Liverpool office. I'm due to start a training contract in September of this year. I work in occupational disease, but I also specialise within fraud within that.
Thank you. So those are our panellists for tonight. So the structure for tonight's session will be during the first 40 or 45 minutes, we'll be dealing with the questions that you've submitted in advance when you signed up for the event. Then what we'll do is for the final sort of half an hour or so, we'll deal with any impromptu questions that you've got on the night. So you'll notice that there's a chat box there throughout the evening. If you think of any questions that you want to put to the panel, either generally or to a specific panelist, pop the question into the chat box and we can deal with that in the second part of the evening. Or equally, when we get to the second part of the evening, if you're feeling brave and you want to come off mute and ask a question, you're more than welcome to do so at that stage. For those in attendance who are listening, I would ask if you could keep your microphones on mute unless you are speaking. So I'll turn to our pre-prepared questions and we'll deal with the first question that we have, which is what are the key skills or qualities required to become a successful solicitor? So Danielle, would you like to get us started on that question?
Yeah, thanks, John. I'm going to pick resilience as my key skill, both from being a trainee and doing all the interviews and quite often getting knocked back for interviews. I think being a resilient lawyer is really important. And it stands you in good stead when you're in front of judges who perhaps don't like the way that you are presenting your case. And it's a really good skill to have generally, I think, in life. So that's my answer for that one. Thanks, John.
Thank you. Great answer to start us off. Richard, anything to add?
I think some of the panel, I'm sure, will agree with me that you need patience and determination at the outset, because it's a real challenge to get a training contract and to find the right firm to you. But as any good lawyer will try and do, I'm not going to give you quite a straight answer to the question, because I don't think there's one size fits all necessarily. I think really it's worthwhile thinking about what area of law, what expertise, practice area fits for you as an individual. And the reason I mentioned that, I deal with serious injury litigation, and I think key skills in my role are empathy and sympathy and being a good people person, and that's why I chose serious injury litigation. But somebody that perhaps deals with wants to deal with multi-million-pound deals and working longer hours to get a deal done and gets the buzz of that, then I think maybe they look to go into commercial law. So I think one size doesn't fit all. I think it depends on the type of person you are and what skills you have. So I'd say think carefully about what area of law you want to do, really, as to what really is the best fit for you.
Thank you. And lastly, Lindsay, do you have any comments on this question?
So I'm a little bit like Richard in terms, I'm not going to answer the question directly, I'm afraid. But what I was thinking when I looked at this question was, one of the key skills, and something I look for in trainees as well when I'm supervising them, is the ability to proofread. And it's a skill that is very important, because we draft court documents, we draft letters. You're going to be putting documents before your supervisor, and the best thing you could do is just create a really good impression, and that translates into your applications as well in terms of proofreading. And I'd also say practice your interview skills for the application. It's not necessarily a skill for a solicitor, but everything is a separate skill. So if you've practiced your applications, you've had someone proofread them, and you're ready for the interview, then you're ready to go. And I suppose my other main skill for a solicitor is probably relationships, is probably the best one I can say. Now, Richard and I probably are going to be opponents at some point in the future. And the best thing that's going to happen is we're going to have a really good relationship, really collaborative. And I think that has improved actually over COVID, when I think certainly the opponents I've had, we've improved our relationships, and we're much more willing to pick up the phone and speak to one another now. And relationships is very important, whether it's clients, whether it's counsel, whether it's judges, whether it's people you're working with at work on your relationships, because they're the things that get you going and get you through the day as well.
Brilliant answer. Some very practical advice there. Okay, so we'll jump on to the second question now. And the question is, when it comes to applications, how do you get across why you should be successful and what makes you different to other applicants? So Danny, I'll turn to you to start on this one.
Thanks, John. Yeah, it's hard to give sort of too much detail generally, because each of us has got different experiences that we're going to draw on for our applications. I think it's important to be honest in your application. It's important to be honest about what experience that you have. But to set yourself apart, if you can be really specific about what it is that you've done. Lots of people might have been on a Law Society committee, but not everyone might have done what you did on the Law Society committee. So if you could draw out the detail of, I don't know, winning X pounds sponsorship for the ball, you know, that's really great. It shows that you've got persuasive skills. It shows that you understand what people are looking for when they're trusting you with the money. If you can bring it down to that level of detail and tie it back to the skills the firms are looking for, I think that's definitely going to make your application stand out. I would echo proofreading as being very important for applications as well. Not to make them stand out, just to make sure that they don't get binned too quickly. Just the final point I wanted to say on applications was that it can be good if you can show a little bit of personality too. If you've got a funny sort of one-line story that you can include, a strange thing that you've done on holiday, or something that you really enjoy, like, I don't know, maybe a champion knitter in Wales or something. Stick it on there, make it stand out. Make sure they've got a reason to remember you other than just the skills that you're talking about.
Brilliant, great advice there. Emanuele, do you have anything to add?
Well, I would like to say that because I have friends who are trying to apply. I'm quite young and try to apply for different training contracts or even contracts outside the legal industry. And my first advice always is literally like try and spend a lot of time on your applications, especially on your cover letter. You only have about 500 or 600 words to express yourself in the first stage. And you really want to make sure that those 500 or 600 words are properly done, tailored to the firm you're applying to. It's very easy to be tempted to write just a sample cover letter and to kind of copy and paste it to 10, 20, 30 firms. But at BLM, as at all other law firms, the graduate recruitment team is literally their job to read applicants' cover letters and CVs and other replies in their application process. So they will know if you haven't really spent a lot of time, really applying yourself to the firm you're trying to get a job from. And other than that, I would say that I definitely echo what Danny said. If you're trying to apply, just definitely put some personality into it. If you have some funny stories of how you got into the law or why you decided to apply for a specific firm, I think you would definitely be better off adding those, because it just makes you different and stand out from the crowd. Yeah.
Excellent, thank you. And lastly, Andrew, any comments on this question?
I think broadly all I can really do is echo what Danny and Emanuele have said. Yeah, proofreading is certainly key. I had a horror story when I used to do applications in which I intended to write think on my feet, but ended up writing think of my feet in one application. And unsurprisingly, didn't get an interview for that one. Equally, I think a little story or something is really helpful. I think you've got to bear in mind, as the thing's been pointed out, is that there are hundreds of applications from people who all are very similar in terms of background, in terms of education, in terms of results. You have to have something that stands out, and it can be innocuous or it can be quite significant little thing that stands out. The other thing I'd probably say, which might be a bit ironic given the fact that I've done it now, but avoid waffle. Try and be concise in what you're saying. As I said, they do have lots and lots of applications. So if you can get your point across in 10 words instead of 20, aim to do it in 10, because they don't have the time to be spending to go through essays setting out what your position is on anything.
Yeah, great advice from all of our panelists there. I think the thing to think about when you come to do applications is to remember that you don't want to seem like a law robot. It's important that you've got the right academics and the right skills for the job. Also, if you've got some genuine interests, put them in there, because it makes you seem like an interesting person. And don't forget that the firms that you're applying to, whoever's reading your application is going to be your colleague in the future. They'll be working with you. And they don't want to work with someone who's completely boring. So if you've got something that sets you aside and really makes you seem like, there's something about you, put it in there. It doesn't have to be all 100% law related. And equally, if you've got something that you're really interested in, it's built up some skills that are then transferable into the law, well, even better, and see if you can work it back in that way. We'll move on to the next question now. The question is, what business skills are important for a solicitor to have? Does anyone have any thoughts on this initially? Wondering if Danny can possibly comment on this, given he's the commercial solicitor on the panel.
I mean, there's a difference between commercial awareness, which I think is absolutely vital if you want to go into commercial law, and business skills themselves, which I think is something that you develop over your career. Law is a business, and as you progress and become more senior, you're going to be expected to take on more responsibility for that business. I think at the stage where you're applying for training contracts, though, it's probably more just showing and understanding that the law firm is a business, rather than needing to develop financial hygiene or other sort of key business skills that'll come later. And yeah, so I think for the moment, if you can just sort of acknowledge in your applications that the law firm is a business and that it's there to make money, and so the things that you're going to be doing need to be driving towards bringing that revenue through the door, that's probably fine. if you are interested in becoming a commercial solicitor, though, the question of commercial awareness is a whole lot broader than just what business skills are, and that's an awareness of what's going on in the markets. Whatever firm you're applying for is going to operate in certain markets. They might have a sector markets or geographical markets. You need to show that you understand the concerns that the client's going to have in those markets, and that you can understand what the product that the firm you're applying for is selling to those clients. It's often a matter, you're not just selling them hours, you're not just selling them documents. What you're selling them is that reassuring hand through the market, that business advice, that confidence that their legal team knows how this transaction is done and knows what the determining features of this particular case are going to be. And to build your awareness of that, do your research as you would do anyway. But when you find the relevant market sectors or market geographies, do research on them as well. Find trade publications or podcasts, interviews if you can on YouTube, and really try and get under the skin of what their clients are going to be thinking about. I think I mentioned this on a previous panel session I've done, but highly recommend the Economist podcasts, which are all free for developing commercial awareness. Really, really useful. And Editor's Picks, which comes out every Monday, is great. A little half hour, everything you need to know in commercial awareness that week.
Excellent. Some great advice there, and practical advice that you can take away. So maybe have a look out for those podcasts, and they may be able to help you going forwards. Does anyone else on the panel have any thoughts? It was quite a comprehensive answer there.
I'd just add, John, that as lawyers, we're what we call distressed purchase. So clients come to us because they need us, not because they want to necessarily instruct us, but they have to because they want a service. And we do that service and provide them with what they need and try to get the end result the very best of our ability. But at the same time, we're always got to be commercially aware as a lawyer that firstly, we don't pursue a case we don't think will win, or we don't pursue a case we don't think will achieve the desired outcome for clients. Because in my early days as a solicitor, I had clients come in to me saying, I'm pursuing this case because it's a matter of principle, and I just feel I've been wronged and I want to get an apology. Well, it's not what we do, and I would never advise somebody to pursue a case as a matter of principle. Similarly, if somebody comes to me and they want to sue somebody that hasn't got any money, I'll tell them, well, you're wasting your time. You might spend 2 years in litigation, you might win the case, but if you can't get the money from them at the end of the day, then you've wasted your time. So it's being commercially savvy to understand that never pursue a case you don't think you'll win. Never pursue a case where you're not going to get paid at the end of the case, or never pursue a case you don't think the client will get paid at the end of the case either. And it sounds very cold and clinical, but whilst we do, as I say, act to the very best of our ability and do our very best for our clients, at the end of the day, we are a business. And at the end of the day, we have to make sure that we're looking after ourselves as a business as well as our clients.
Yeah, I think that's crucial advice. And certainly for when you go into interviews, it's always important to understand the business model of the firm that you're applying for and how they get paid. So are they a firm that make money through legal aid? Are they a firm that make money through conditional fee agreements, no win, no fee, where you'll get paid at the end of the case? Is it on a fixed fee, whereby you'll need to ensure that you work more efficiently and you're not wasting time? Or of course, is it, sort of hourly rates where you've got those commercial clients, and as Danny says, you need to be able to sell that properly to the client, so the client understands that they're getting that helping hand and that they are dealing with the best in the business, so to speak. So if you understand the commercial model for that firm that you're applying to, you understand how they earn money and how you can factor into that. And that always makes you a much more employable candidate if you've got that knowledge going in for an interview. Okay, we'll move on to another question now. The next question is it possible for a mature student to secure a training contract, or is it more difficult because they are competing with younger students? Does anybody have any thoughts on this?
I'll go, John.
Yeah.
So Danielle.
I'm living proof that you can get a training contract as an older, a more mature person. I didn't get mine until I was 27 or 28. And before that, I'd worked hard as paralegals and working myself up through the business and making myself known in order to secure a training contract. So, and we've just done a load of interviews for trainees at Jackson Lees as well, and we had older candidates, not straight from uni straight into a paralegal role applying, and some were successful this time around. So yeah, absolutely. I think it's just picking the types of firm that you want to work for in the longer term, like Richard said, and pitching yourselves to them.
Yeah, and I think that age is certainly no barrier. I know of people within the profession that have been in their 40s, sometimes even 50s, when they've qualified. And sometimes that can make you quite an attractive proposition for a law firm, because you will have a lot of previous experience, maybe from working in other fields, that you can bring into this profession. So I certainly think that age is no barrier to entering the profession. Okay, another question that we've had is it possible for an individual that's self-employed but wants to train as a solicitor to maintain a business at the same time? I don't know if anyone on the panel has any comments on this one.
I would say it very much depends on the contract with your employer, that you need to check that. You need to check whether there's a conflict. And I think the most important thing actually is to be honest with your employer. You know, as solicitors, integrity is key to what we do. I became a trustee for a charity about a year ago, and it wasn't going to conflict with what my work was or anything like that. But I made my employer aware of it in advance, and I suppose got their authority as such to do it, because it's about a trust relationship, and it's about making sure that your employer is confident that you're going to spend enough time on their business. They're investing in you as a trainee. They want to make sure you're investing in them as well.
Yeah, certainly great advice there.
On the other side, sorry, of that question, if it's a question as to whether you're able to do the LPC or the equivalent of the SQE at the same time as having a self-employed job, it really does depend on the extent of how much time your self-employment takes up. It is possible to have a job and train at the same time. I did my LPC part-time whilst I was still working at Weightmans. It was difficult at times because just the sheer level of work in some instances, but it is very much possible, and you know, legal education providers are aware and do cater for it. But it can be difficult, and I suppose it does depend on the extent of how much time that self-employment takes up for you.
Yeah, absolutely. Right, we have a number of questions specifically for the solicitors at BLM on the panel. So I'll pose the 3 questions and ask our 2 panelists from BLM to deal with these as they see fit. So the first is, why did you choose BLM over other firms? What tips would you give for applying for a training contract at BLM? And what does BLM look for in potential trainees? So we'll turn to Lindsey first, then we'll turn to Emanuele after that.
Emanuele's got a lovely answer for this. It's much better than mine. But for the first one, I didn't train at BLM. I joined about 5 years ago to BLM, and the reason why I went there was because I had an awareness of the market. I had an awareness that they did similar work to what I did, and I'd had the fortunate experience, I suppose, of working where they were co-defendants on a case. So I knew what the quality of their work was like. I knew how they worked. I knew some of the partners there. I knew what the atmosphere was like. And I was lucky. I saw a job that came up, and BLM for me was a firm that actually said to me, I didn't have catastrophic experience before I went into the firm, but they said to me, you're a litigator. I understand what the civil procedure rules are. I can transfer my skills. And they were one of the firms that were welcoming and open to that opportunity for me to transfer my skills to them.
Excellent. And Emanuele?
As to the why I chose BLM, I have a nice little story. I was an intern at another firm in London when I was a student. You know, your classic 2-3 weeks internship during the summer. And one day, the partner in the firm asked me whether I wanted to come with him, to go with him to a meeting he had with a big law firm in London, a big English law firm. The firm I was interning in was an Italian law firm, as you may have guessed. I'm from Italy. And so I did. I went to the firm, and it turns out the firm was BLM. It was the London office, beautiful office. We were in this big meeting room, and funnily enough, I was the only person sitting at the table who was not a senior partner. So I was at the start, it was quite a bit of a daunting experience because I was just a first year student. But then during the lunch break and during the networking session, I got to speak with the partners at BLM, and they really spoke to me. We spent some time having a nice chat. And I was left with a really good impression of BLM. And I told myself, you know what, next year I'll apply. And that's why, really. As for the second question, what tips would you give for applying for a training contract at BLM? Well, it's very much the same tips I would give for applying to a training contract at any other firm in the UK. Really, like, make sure to spend a lot of time looking at the firm, trying to understand why you want to apply to the firm, whether they deal with commercial law, whether they deal with more insurance or personal injury, or other industries. Just make sure you have a real interest and you can back it up. And even before applying, what I always say is make sure you have enough work experience to be able to make sure to kind of stand out from the crowd. You have your academics, you have your university, you have done that. Make sure you spend a lot of time on your application as far as a cover letter. And I think that's all you can do. And I mean, if you do it well, if you spend enough time, you will get it eventually. And I just want to echo what Danielle said. It's, resilience is number one. If you don't get it the first time, you'll get it the second time. If you don't get it the second time, you'll get it a third time, and so on. So just keep going, and you'll do fine. Yes. And for the last one, I don't want to be too long, of course. What does BLM look for potential trainees? That's probably Lindsey is a senior lawyer at BLM, and she deals with trainees a lot. So she'll probably be telling you some more useful advice. As per what I can say, my intake, we are all very keen, very eager to work, very determined. I mean, if they tell us to do something, we do it, no problem. So BLM wants a trainee who will be reliable, who will be charismatic and hardworking, very enthusiastic to work. And I think the social skills of the job are very important as well, because at the end of the day, we work with other people, and we need to be nice to other people as well as to our clients. So it's always nice to have a colleague who is nice to work with. So I think BLM, especially in my experience, is looking for just a nice person to work with. Really, it sounds simple, but it's pretty important, I think.
Great advice there. Right, we'll move on to the next question.
Can I, sorry, John.
No, absolutely, yeah.
Briefly. There was a question, the chat question that popped up just about the culture at BLM. And I think Emanuele and I are probably a little bit biased. But I would say it's really supportive, and there are always going to be people you can speak to, ask questions of. And in terms of what we look for, I, as a supervisor, don't expect trainees to know everything, because if you did, the job would be very boring, wouldn't it, from day one? So I don't expect you to know everything. But what we look for, and I think what the culture is somebody who's willing to come in, ask questions, and learn and reflect on what they've done, and just really take an interest in our work, to be honest, and actually be keen on a case. And if I give somebody a task, I'd like them to do it to the best of their ability, to do it enthusiastically, to come back to me, and if they've got questions, to come back to me and ask about it. So I'd like to think it's quite an open culture, really.
Excellent. That sounds like a good firm to work for. Okay, so the next question, what is the biggest challenge that you've faced in your career? And what's the biggest challenge for aspiring solicitors now? So does anyone have anything that they want to jump in with on this question?
I feel like I'm taking over this.
If you've got an answer, please jump in.
For me, I suppose the biggest challenge, before I joined BLM about 5 years ago, I honestly felt I didn't know where to go in my career. And this is really honest. I'd done fraud work, civil fraud work for quite a while. I didn't know where I wanted to go. I didn't know if I wanted to stay at the firm I was at, apply for partnership, what I wanted to do. I'd qualified as a criminal lawyer a long time ago. I'd missed some of my criminal colleagues. So what I did was I went out and I got a mentor. and she totally changed my perspective and made me realise that I'm the one in control of my career. And what I did was totally change my perspective. I started volunteering, doing different things, and really just change where I wanted to be. And I identified gaps in my CV that I couldn't move on, and I couldn't move on to the firms I might have wanted to go to. And I filled those gaps with all the activities that she encouraged me to do. So I would say the biggest challenge is you sort of get to a bit of a, I suppose, a glass ceiling or a wall. You don't really know where to go. And it's just lovely to have somebody that you can speak to. And a mentor is, you know, somebody I'd really recommend. And I've got 2 mentees at the minute, just somebody who can push you a little bit further and someone you can bounce ideas off.
Yeah, I think I'd echo that on 2 points. Firstly, trying to obtain a mentor. So, you know, if you can try and obtain a mentor from your university, maybe try and reach out to somebody in practice. That's always a good way of going about things. But the other good point you raised there was gaps in the CV. And quite often, first time, second time, even third time, fourth time round, you might apply for training contracts and you'll really struggle and you find that you're coming up short. And it can be just because there are a few gaps in your CV somewhere. And you'll notice it when you come to draft the applications, because a lot of them, by and large, are pretty similar. There'll be specific questions here and there, but the key questions are always going to be the same. And if you find that you're struggling to answer some of the questions because, you know, you might not have the relevant experience or whatever it might be, look for those. Look at where you're struggling to answer those questions and look at what experience you can gain to try and plug those gaps and try and fill that. So think about it as, how do I answer those questions on the application form, and how can I hit all of these points? And if you find that you're falling short somewhere, really put the effort in to focus on that so that you've got those answers so that you can deal with the questions. So I think that was a really good point that was raised.
Can I just add as well on what the biggest challenge at the moment is for aspiring solicitors, the other side of that question? I think the biggest challenge for anybody trying to get into the profession right now is essentially the fact that it is now. The circumstances with Brexit and then also COVID, everything is to a degree on hold. And I don't, from what I've heard in terms of statistics, it doesn't look likely that it's as bad as what it was in 2008 with the financial crash. But the legal sector is essentially a service sector. It services the rest of the economy. So it's entirely dependent on what happens there, because everything is kind of on a pause at the moment. Recruitment still is going on, but I'm not sure about Emanuele, but I know our trainees in Weightmans are essentially having to do traineeships during their training contracts remotely, which is unprecedented really until now. So I think the biggest challenge right now is the fact that it is right now. And hopefully later this year, as everything reopens, I think everything will become hopefully a lot more clearer as to where the profession is going and where the economy really is going.
Yeah, good.
I would add, John, as well, the biggest, from my point of view, the biggest challenge for a solicitor, for me, and for aspiring solicitors really as well, is probably time. And what I mean by that is that we do everything measured by units, and we have to justify everything we do during the day. So we have, as everybody on the panel will know, you know, we clock on with our units and we have to record so many units a day. We have to justify what we've done in the day, because that's how we charge for our work. At the same time, we've got other responsibilities, I'm sure we all have. We've got life outside work, we've got inside of work, we might have business development, opportunities to grow and try and bring in work as well. So there's so many different demands on our time. And it's learning, I think, to juggle and to make sure you work well with the time you've got and focus on what you need to do rather than try and spread yourself too thinly. And that really applies to aspiring solicitors as well and making applications. I agree with you, John, that look for your gaps in your CV, but focus on things you are strong at, focus on things that you can develop and grow and show that you can bring to a firm, rather than try and do everything. Because I think standing out in a CV, if you've got a few key skills that you can really demonstrate and really show just how how that makes you different from everybody else, is probably much better than just trying to do everything and just putting everything on a CV that says, well, you've done a bit of everything, because perhaps that highlights that you're not as focused as perhaps the person that's just done one or two things well.
Yeah, No, great advice there. And as you say, if you can do a couple of things well and it really sings to that firm, then why not, you know, really go to town and double down on those skills. Absolutely, I would agree with that. Any thoughts from anyone else in terms of any particular challenges you've faced or any challenges you can see for aspiring solicitors going forwards?
I remember, well, I don't just remember, sort of ongoing challenge as a junior lawyer can be asking for help and, you know, owning up when you don't know something, or, you know, overcoming that slight fear of putting your hand up and admitting that something's gone wrong, or, you know, the client's really not happy with the way you've done something, whatever it may be. I think that can be a challenge. That can be a really big challenge, especially if you're quite ambitious or ego-driven. You need to be honest with yourself about it. And my advice there is, you know, appreciate that it's a challenge and recognize that, but don't let that stop you. You're aiming to be a professional with professional duties. You know, it's not just yourself you're trying to serve the client's best interests for. Actually have a legal obligation to do that. So when you do come up against these issues, never be afraid to go and look for help. And I find without fail, senior solicitors will give you that help because they understand how important it is. And often they'll give it to you in a really friendly and constructive way. You know, there'll be the odd time you might get told off a little bit, but it's not actually that bad to get told off. It's more important to put your hand up at the right time. And you know, just as a little tip, people do like it if you bring solutions instead of problems. So if you do find you've got yourself into a corner, come up with what your best plan is to get out of it. It might not be a whole plan, it might be a half a plan, but whatever your best plan is, and then go and look for help and be like, this is how far I've gone, or this is what I'm thinking of doing. I need your help to get it over the line.
Yeah, really shows that you've thought about the problem beforehand, doesn't it? Because ultimately, you know, if you go and just asking for help, essentially, well, what was the point in you being there on the job? At least if you've thought about it beforehand and said, well, these are my thoughts on it, this is where my research has taken me so far, but I need your help. So yeah, so I think that's great advice. I think we'll turn to one more question before we move on to the questions that we've received in the chat. So the last question that we'll deal with is, what life or work experience best served you in preparing you for your career as a solicitor? Does anybody have any thoughts on this one? I think, while people are thinking, I think I'll jump in. One thing I did whilst I was at university was I volunteered at the Citizens Advice Bureau, CAB, and I really recommend that. Because you know it's an opportunity for you to build some skills, and by volunteering, you're doing a lot of the job that you would as a solicitor. So you have people coming in off the street, and they'll want to speak to you, and the problems could be absolutely anything. So you're not limited to one area of law or one specific type of problem. So you're gaining the skills of dealing with people. So the people skills that would be required of a solicitor, because that could be part of your day-to-day job. Also, you've got to turn your hand to these problems. So it could be something you've never dealt with before. You're doing a little bit of research and saying, right, I'll come back to you and I'll help you on this. So you're building a lot of the practical skills that are needed for that job. And I think also, once you've finished your LPC or your law degree, if you don't get a training contract right away, look to obtain a paralegal position, ideally in the area of law that you look to specialize in, because you'll be doing, by and large, a lot of the same jobs that you'll be doing once you qualify and once you become a solicitor. So as I say, similar to the CAB job, you'll be dealing with clients, you'll be running files. If you're involved in litigation, you'll be drafting claim forms, sometimes drafting pleadings, maybe sending off instructions to counsel, maybe even sometimes dealing with the other side and looking to do settlements. Sometimes you may even get to go to court and do, sort of interim applications, pad applications, things like that. So by doing the paralegal work, you're building up a lot of those skills, helping to build your CV. And if you're paralegaling at a firm that offers training contracts, well, you've already got one foot in the door as well. So I think that's one of the things that can really help you to progress your career. I think another thing as well is, whilst you're at university, maybe get yourself involved in mooting as well, because that's a really good way of showing that you've got a real knowledge of the law, so to speak. Because particularly if you can win a moot, you can say, well, look, I was able to analyse the law and apply it in this situation. And if you're interested in advocacy going forwards, then that helps you there. Equally, if you're not, you can say, well, look, this is why I want to be a litigation solicitor. This is why I don't want to be in court. So you can show that you've got that experience there. So that's something else that can really help you.
That's good advice, John. Excellent advice. And at Irwin Mitchell, we run assessment centres for trainees, which are generally most of the day involving various different tasks. Quite, well, very, very challenging day. And I sit on one of the assessors at those assessment centres, so I see a lot of CVs, a lot of candidates every year, and see a lot of different jobs and a lot of different hobbies. And what I would say is I agree with you completely that paralegaling and mooting and all of these things are great skills and they're good transferable skills. But conversely, don't rule anything out. So if I have a candidate that's worked in McDonald's, then you can use it to their advantage. For example, it's working to a deadline in a pressured environment as part of a team. Whatever you do, you can sell it. So whatever you do, turn it around in your CV and in your interview to say, well, actually, I've done this, and these are the skills I learned, and these are the skills that transfer to becoming a lawyer. And so I think it's really important. So paralegaling is you know, it's great, but if you can't get a job as a paralegal, don't be disheartened, because any other jobs that you can do, any other skills you can bring that are transferable, make sure you demonstrate them and make sure you show why they will benefit the firm you're applying to. Yeah.
No, it's funny you should say that. I did exactly that. I worked when I was at university at Primark for a little while, and I used a lot of the skills that I built up there, made them transferable, and I was able to talk about that in interviews as well. So there's no such thing as a wasted opportunity or a wasted job. You can build the skills from anything at all and make them transferable to this career. Does anyone else have any comments before we move on to the impromptu questions?
Only to echo what's been said so far. Oh, sorry, Lynn.
Sorry, Danny. I worked in a hotel when I was 16 and 17, and actually what that taught me was just the ability to speak with anyone, everyone, just make friendships, just speak with anyone you come across. And I started having quite a genuine desire to be nosy into different things, so different parts of the hotel I'd go into and things like that. But what that's led to actually is now when I look at health and safety assessments, for example, in the day-to-day role I do now, and they're in a hotel, I've got that experience of practically working in that hotel. You know, I know what those people do day to day that some of my colleagues might not do because they've not been there. So like Richard says, turn it to your advantage, show that you've actually got the experience and the, you know, feet in the door, I suppose, that you can bring something else a little bit different. And just like, because I was nosy when I used to do police stations, who doesn't want to go inside a custody suite at 3 in the morning and see what it's actually like? You know, you get a little bit of insight and it's a bit different. And as a lawyer, you get to do things you might not do in a different profession. And it is quite interesting from that basis.
Yeah, 100% agree with that. It's very interesting no matter what you do. Right, okay, I think we'll take this opportunity to turn to some of the questions that we've had in the chat. If you have any further questions, feel free to keep popping them in the chat and we'll work our way through them. So the first question that we have is, will a university student be disadvantaged by applying straight for a training contract rather than through a vacation scheme? Because of COVID, many firms aren't offering vacation schemes. So should you be applying for vacation schemes before a training contract? Anybody have any thoughts on this?
If you want, I can give my take on it. As when I got my training contract, I was a university student. So my opinion on it has always been that getting a training contract through a vacation scheme is always the best way to get your contract, as you're actually spending 2 weeks in the firm and you're understanding if you really like it or not. And also normally, especially at BLM, but I'm sure other firms are very similar, the jobs offered to trainees who do the vacation schemes are much larger in comparison to those available to straight applicants. Now, I'm talking about a pre-COVID world. And if new firms now have decided not to offer vacation schemes, that will be of course different. There will not be vacation schemers, and hence all of the jobs available will be for, you know, straight applicants from a training contract application. So that's probably different. But normally, I'd say that the vacation scheme was my preferred way, and I've seen many other colleagues of mine think the same way. Yeah.
Thank you. Any other thoughts on this at all?
Very much depends on the firm. Some firms only recruit from their vacation schemes. And I think when you're doing your research into the firms you're applying for, see what their policy is, see what they say. And some of them do straight training contracts. It's about looking at the questions and seeing if you can identify that you like that firm enough and you can persuade them that you're ready to go into a training contract straight away. Or if maybe you do want to get an idea what that firm's like, you might be there a very, very long time if you like it and you want to work there. You know, if you can get a training contract placement or a vacation placement, it might be a good insight into the firm that you can use for future.
Yeah, good advice. Excellent. Okay. Any other thoughts on this before I move on to the next question?
Sorry, Richard, you go.
I was going to say, I'm not sure if we're offering vacation schemes this summer. I don't know. It depends what happens with COVID, but apply through either route. It doesn't prejudice the candidate, I don't think, as to which route to apply for with our firm anyway.
Yeah. So it would appear then it really depends on the firm. So some firms tend to prefer people to do the vacation scheme, others not. So I think the key thing to take away really is do your research and have a look at the sort of application pages on a firm's website. Sorry, Andrew, did you want to say something?
All I was going to say was basically echo what everybody else has said. It is entirely dependent upon the firm as to how they approach it. If you can't get on a vacation scheme, though, it's not fatal. I've never done a vacation scheme in my life and still managed to get a training contract. If you don't get one, but you really are very committed to experience in life at that firm, there is always the chance once you leave university to get an administration job there, or even a paralegal job if you want to apply. And that gives you probably just as much of an insight into what working as an NQ solicitor and spending life there is going to be like, as much as vacation scheme will. It's not fatal if you don't get a vacation scheme.
Yeah, not at all. Not at all. I mean, any experience really can be used to your advantage. So even if you're just doing a few days worth of experience in a firm, that's always helpful and certainly can be utilised on an application form. Okay, the next question that we've got is, and I don't know whether any of our panelists will know about this specifically, so if not, it's okay. For those just embarking on the law degree, what are your views on the route of LPC versus SQE? Don't know if anybody knows much about this at all on the panel.
I'll take that one up.
Yeah, sure.
In terms purely of finances, I know they released this week the SQE figures, and financially it's looking a lot more viable to do the LPC than the SQE. I think the SQE has been priced up generally. I think it's roughly around £3,000 to £4,000 more expensive than the LPC. The original pilot that the SRA was talking about went on quite a lot about how the fact that it's revolutionary and it would bring down prices, but about halfway through, that whole talk about bringing down the price of legal education fell away and wasn't mentioned again. And we now know why. It's the fact that it's going to be more expensive. There are merits to it. It does emphasize a lot more on the job training as opposed to the academic side of things. It's a lot more vocation based rather than the academic side of things that the LPC tends to be. But it's going to basically be the same course and the same overall package, just in different segments. And I think if you do get the chance at the moment, financially, the LPC probably does make more sense than the SQE. But if you do want any further information about it, I know the Junior Lawyers Division on the Law Society website, they've been very active in campaigning on this point and providing literature and information for junior lawyers. So it's well worth to have a look there. and your local JLD as well might be able to help.
Brilliant, very comprehensive answer there. So hopefully you found that that answer to be helpful.
And just to add on from that, just today I've seen that lawcareers.net introduced an SQE hub. So if you have any more questions, I think that's the best place to look as well. So Law Careers SQE hub.
Oh, great. Thank you. A lot of resources there that our students can have a look at then. Right. The next question that we have, why did you choose the solicitor route rather than the barrister route? Anybody like to jump in on this one?
Can I cheat on this and say that I have my higher rights? So I'm going to claim that I'm a little bit of both. I think they're very, very different. They're very, very different roles. As a solicitor, you have much more client contact. You have much more involvement in the case from start to finish. Whereas as a barrister, I suppose you sort of parachuted in at certain points for certain hearings, and you might be asked to give your advice and opinion and things in conference. It depends what you like, I think, and it depends whether you want that close client contact and to handle the file and sort of see it from start to finish, or if you're more happy sort of dipping in and out of it a little bit. But if you like the advocacy part of barrister work, there is nothing stopping you going and doing advocacy at court, and you don't need your higher rights to do it. You're more than welcome to go and do it if you're at a firm that encourages it. So that's kind of my feeling on it. I didn't want to go down the barrister route. I wanted a bit more of the client handling as well.
Brilliant.
Do you mind if I jump in on this one again? Sorry, John. Yeah. I feel like I'm dominating at the moment, but I did make that choice between solicitor and barrister. I know John from when we were both did bar school together, did the BPTC as it was back then, and applied for pupillage pretty much every year. Always got down to last 2 or 3, but never quite got pupillage. And then at the end of the day, made the decision. And the decision, by that time, I was working in a solicitor's firm as opposed to doing just county court advocacy, which I was doing before that. And I basically had to make the decision as to what I wanted to do. And it didn't boil down to what the jobs were respectively like. I was still getting quite a hefty amount of advocacy in the work that I was doing. I was still getting quite a bit of information, quite a bit of work like what a barrister would do in terms of coming into a case late on, getting something referred to me, asked for my opinion, what can we do on this, this and this. So the work didn't really differ. And I think if you are interested in the advocacy, the higher rights route that Lindsay's mentioned, that is the way to do it. The thing it boiled down to me was simply the lifestyle choices. I knew by then how stressful a life at the bar could be, knowing the stress that I put barristers through by sending papers to them at 5 o'clock for a trial the next day. It's simply lifestyle. I think in reality, it's whether you like the relative freedom you get at the bar. You're not tied to a 9-to-5 job, but equally it's the late nights, the fact that you don't have the overall control of the process. You are getting parachuted in, as Lindsay said, right at the end. You can't go back and fix mistakes that your instructing solicitor's done. You just have to live with it and get on with it. And yeah, it was purely down to the lifestyle. I just made the choice, well, I'm enjoying what I'm doing. The jobs are roughly similar. I prefer the fixed wage and the ability to regulate my hours a bit more. And that's what I went with in the end.
I think you've covered all the real key considerations there.
John, before we move on, sorry,
Danny, you go ahead.
I was just I think there's a lot of litigators and advocates on this panel, so I just wanted to plant the flag for transactional lawyers. There's a whole host of things that solicitors get to do that barristers and advocates never would. As a solicitor, especially on the transactional and commercial side, you could be really close to huge global businesses doing really cool stuff, really cutting edge, new products, new services, new technologies, Google's AI developments, people doing autonomous cars, the rollout of 5G, SpaceX, all this great stuff. Barristers only see that stuff when it goes wrong. And they don't even see the most interesting part of it. They see, you know, some supplier didn't supply the right screw or something. As a solicitor, you're there from the start. You're there as a boardroom advisor. When the business says, we want to do this, no one's ever done it before. You know, there is no PLC precedent for it. I need a really strong transactional solicitor, the finger on the pulse of the market, understands who we work with and how our business runs, who's going to be able to advise us and protect us from the risks inherent in our business. So I think if you're interested in the commercial world, how the real levers of finance and business move in the world, there's a really strong argument for taking the solicitor route, because you're not going to come close to that as a barrister, even though you do get to wear a nice wig.
I think the question on everyone's lips, Danny, is how similar is it to Suits?
This one came up last time and I tried to avoid it.
I have to say, it does sound pretty cool the way you've explained it.
So, do you know what? Honestly, there are moments where you walk into a boardroom and you're like, wow, Harvey Specter belongs in my shoes. But there's massively unglamorous sides as well. You know, you don't see Harvey sort of running out to Tesco to grab 3 ready meals because he's trying to get a deal signed in the next 48 hours. That's not on Suits, and it will happen every now and then. But if those little moments of it being really cool are enough, they'll see you through those ready meals.
Brilliant. Great answer there. Okay.
I was just going to answer my little question that's popped up in the chat, if that's okay. Just about.
Oh yeah, sure. I've not seen that.
It was just a question about whether or not. So I financed it myself, but I did it with the support of my firm. So a little bit of both, I suppose, in response to your question. But they were very encouraging. And then my horror story of getting my higher rights. First time I was in the Crown Court, I'd made this fantastic application that the defendant would not be brought up in handcuffs to the dock. Successful. We were waiting in the court. Defendant's brought up to the dock, waiting for just before the judge comes in. Defendant jumps the dock and runs out of the courtroom. And this is my first hearing I've ever done in the Crown Court, and the judge walks in. You know, I didn't know where to look. So, high right's great, but maybe not. Maybe not if you don't want that experience. But yeah, my firm supported me totally to do it.
Brilliant. Right, okay. The next question that we've got is, what made you choose the area of law that you have specialised in? Or is the answer into it?
I do claimant serious injury litigation, and I love it. I'm really passionate about what I do, and the principle of personal injury compensation is to try and put somebody back in the position they would have been had the accident not occurred. And that means ultimately trying to secure an award of money at the end of the case by way of compensation. But that's not what gets me out of bed in the morning or what drives me every day. Because what I'm most passionate about is just being able to be part of the team that tries to make a difference to somebody's life, to try and get them back in the position, or as far back in the position as they would have been had the accident not occurred. And that's why I love what I do, because it's about trying to be part of the team to make that difference, however small that might be. And most of my clients will never go back to how they were, but trying to get and help them get back some sort of quality of life is massively rewarding. So the aim, of course, is to secure that award of money at the end of the case, but it's definitely not my driver, really. It's just making that difference, and that might sound a bit corny, but I just love doing it, and I think perhaps all of the panel have different reasons as to why they chose their area of law, but it's when it came back. I'll come back to what I said right at the start of this talk, was and that choose what's best for you and choose what fits your personality, because every area of law is different, and every area of law involves different skills and perhaps different set of personality skills. So choose what's best for you, really, and what suits you.
What I do, Richard, is really, it's like the next bit from what you do. So I manage the money for people that have lost capacity, and a lot of it derives from birth injuries and road traffic accidents and catastrophic injuries. So much like Richard, my passion is taking that money and helping people create this environment that enables them to be independent and autonomous despite these horrendous injuries that have been, or the hand that's been dealt to them. And I didn't actually come to court protection because I thought, oh, I hadn't really heard of it before I'd applied for the role. But it's a bit of everything. It's a bit of family law. It's a bit of advocacy. It's lots of drafting. It's a bit of conveyancing, and it just blows your mind. And you completely have to act with a different hat on every hour of every day, because every client has some different question that you have to address for them. And that really suits my personality, I think, because I quite like having a problem to solve. And it helps when you've got a lot of money, but some of our clients don't have a lot of money. So sometimes you have to battle with local authorities to get funding. So I think that excitement and having that sort of 2 days are never the same. I really like that aspect of the role that I do.
Do you find that you have your clients for many years at a time then?
Yeah. We're looking, I think one of the firm's longest standing clients is coming up to about 30 years. Yeah. So, a child brain injury case settled in their teens, and they're now in their sort of late 40s, but thereabouts. So yeah, sometimes obviously as Richard will know, some of the clients have got very limited life expectancies. So a lot of the times we're having to do everything with really short timescales, buying a house, adapting a house. I mean, if you buy a house, it might take you 3 to 6 months. If we buy a house for a client, you have to find a house, make sure it's suitable, talk about getting contracts in place for all the adaptation work. So you could be talking 2 years before this poor injured person can move into a house. Then you've got to get a package of care in to make sure that they can actually live with some element of independence. So, and they might only have 20 years of their life, and you've spent 2 to 3 of it getting a house sorted for them. So it doesn't sound like a lot of time, but for the families, that's a huge time that they're missing out on.
Yeah. So, I mean, going back to the skills we were talking about before, you must have to develop a lot of the skills that are required of a solicitor then for work within court of protection.
Yeah, you definitely get pulled pillar to post.
Right. Anyone else have any thoughts on why they selected their specific area of law?
I do TMT now, which stands for Technology, Media and Telecommunications. Most of the work that we do splits out into corporate support, service-based work, or IT outsourcing based work against service-based work, telecommunications deals, and lots of data privacy work. I didn't go through law school, eagerly awaiting GDPR to come out in 2018. That it just so happened that in the first seat of my training contract, I was in a commercial seat, and GDPR had just come out in May. I landed there in September, and the first job I was given was to read it cover to cover 3 times. It took 2 days. Yeah, it's long. But it just so lined up for me that all this new work was coming into the firm, which was a smaller firm than Brabners. All this new work was coming into the firm, and I'd been given this amazing leg up whereby everyone around me was essentially on the same level. The law had only just come out. There was there wasn't necessarily a familiarity advantage that other people around me had. So it was a real opportunity to push forwards, take on slightly more responsibility than a trainee might otherwise have been given. And I tell this story just to make the point that you don't need to decide as a student, don't need to decide as a first seat trainee, second seat trainee. If you keep your mind open and you're able to think on your feet, put yourself in a position to walk through a door that's opened for you, then you'll find that you might end up somewhere that is perfectly suited for you and the experiences that you built up. And it's not been, a master plan to get there. It's not been dog eat dog or trying to fight to get this particular seat that you want. It's just the way things have naturally turned out. So I would say just don't feel the need to specialize too early. Definitely as a student, don't feel the need to pick what type of area you want to specialize in.
Yeah, no, great advice. So, so the key thing is, as Danny says, don't think too early about where you want to specialise, because you just don't know what opportunities are going to arise. So the key thing is just take on any opportunities and see them as a real chance to learn and develop. Any other thoughts on that, or shall I move on to the next question? Okay, let me just have a look at the chat, see if we've got any further questions that have popped through. Right, okay, I think that covers most things. So we're coming up towards the end of the evening now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn to our panelists one by one, just to leave us with a final thought. So just a few words of wisdom and a final piece of advice for our students to take away. So I'll work my way around the screen from left to right. So the first person is Richard. So would you like to leave us with some final thoughts?
Yeah, thanks, John. We've discussed what might set you apart and how difficult it is to apply for training contracts and what to do next. And it is challenging, ever more so in present environment. But just Danielle said right at the start of this evening, resilience, and make sure you build your resilience, but make sure you build your own personal brand as well. And what I mean by that is objectively look at your CV, look at where your weaknesses might be, ask other people to look at your CV and give an objective analysis of what it might contain, and just really think very carefully about what you need to develop, and then think about what makes you stand out and what skills you might have that might appeal to a law firm, and then work from there. So don't give up, keep working hard on it, but make sure that you objectively take that step back and look at your CV and really make sure that you focus on where your weaknesses are, because in assessing people for training contracts, I know that somebody wants to work in the law and I know that somebody wants a training contract, but what I want to know is what sets them apart, why they want to work for my firm, and I want to know whether they'll fit in, and that's what matters more than anything else, more than any law that they've done or some generic interest. It's that focus really that applies. So don't give up, I suppose, is the message, and just keep focusing on your strengths.
Thanks. Great inspirational words there. Danny, any parting words for us?
It's always tough for these sort of final comments because you feel like it's going to be really good. And I'm not sure that what I've got to say is. I always remember listening to a podcast when I was studying, and it was J.K. Rowling telling a story about the Harry Potter draft and how many times it got rejected before it was accepted. And obviously now she's a multi-billionaire. And there's a couple of different ways you can look at it, but I think one of the points that she made was that you really need to value your failures. You are going to fail. Everyone fails. Most people fail multiple times a day. Even just the fact that you failed means that you set yourself a goal. So even being able to fail means you've done something. Do you know what I mean? Some people can't fail. They can't even fail because they've not set themselves a goal. So got that one in the bag already. Then every time you do fail, you learn something new. Ideally you'll spot what mistake it was that you made so that you won't make that mistake again. So every time you fail, you're getting a little bit better. And going back to resilience, which I think is worth echoing again. Every time you fail, you're going to get that little bit stronger, and the next time won't bother you. And there was a question we didn't touch on, or maybe I missed it, about exam failures in the chat. And I think, it's okay to fail exams. Lots of people fail exams. Don't let it hold any power over you. Value it, learn from it, recognize what it's done for you and your character. And if it comes up in an interview, just make sure you've got a strong narrative about it. Tell a story about how it's spurred you on, or you've learned something from it, or you've got better since then. And I think people will value that.
Great advice there. Thank you. Danielle, any final words?
I'd probably say, and it's going to sound really simplistic, but find something that you love doing and want to go and do every day, because there's nothing worse than waking up in the morning and really not wanting to go into work and do that particular job. And yes, you might have difficult clients, but I think if generally you do an area of law that you're passionate about, then that really just makes your whole rest of your life so much more enjoyable. I love going to work, albeit it's in a very small office at home at the moment. But generally, I really enjoy, the interaction with my colleagues, the interaction with my clients. I'm involved in training and development, and I just have a really great time. And I think I'm very privileged to be in the position I'm in, and I really wouldn't want to be somebody that goes to work that's miserable and be a mood hoover, they call it, where, you're dragging everybody down, and that type of a personality does really stand out for a career progression perspective in probably most firms, from your commercial firms down to your high street firms. You want to stand out when you're in, if you start as a paralegal or as an apprentice, you will get noticed, and it'll stand you in good stead for any interviews that you're doing.
Great advice. Lindsey, any words of wisdom for us?
I'm going to use this as a slight platform for my charity work, actually. But in terms of what Danny has said, in terms of explaining where your failures are, and in terms of what Rich has said as to where your weaknesses are, something that I really benefited from when I had my mentor was doing the charity work and doing other activities. And now I have my own mentees, being able to advise them and reflect on what I learned. So things that you could do as a charity, and I know it's very difficult at the minute. I know it's COVID. I know you can't go and work in a charity shop and things like that. But what I have developed and worked with my mentees on, and also worked with some school children as well, who are doing the Duke of Edinburgh, is you can create and set up an activity in aid of a charity. So something you might look at and that you can then put in your applications is, I didn't have any experience of legislation and how to apply it. So actually, by setting up this group, you're going to be looking at Gambling Act, maybe if you're setting up a competition in aid of the charity, you're going to be looking at data protection, something you can draw into your application. And you can create a project for yourself that you can then put into your application. And if anybody does want to contact me afterwards and try and figure out how they can do that, then you're more than welcome to. But Richard said earlier on in this, when you work in McDonald's or wherever you work, you're working in a team, and it's all about actually looking back, looking at your life, looking what you do in everyday experiences, and being able to answer those application questions, and being able to say, well, actually I did this, or I didn't have this skill, so I went out and I found it and I've developed it, and therefore I can contribute to your firm because of what I've done, because I really want to work at your firm, and this is the effort I've put in to come here.
Great practical advice there. Andrew, any final words for us?
Just two, really. I mentioned before, in terms of a little resource, probably try your local JLDs. They provide local forums like this, which give you an insight into local law firms beyond, the big ones like Weightmans, like BLM, and Jackson Lees. They give you an insight into the smaller firms and people there, and allow you to network when you're a student. And the other is never be afraid to ask for help. And I know that was commented on in terms of your professional life, but in terms of applying, if you do happen to see any of us, or you happen to see anybody who is at a firm and you think they may be able to help, by all means, just approach them, drop them a message and ask, can you help me on this? Do you have any insights you can provide? The worst that can happen is that they ignore you or they say no. If not, then you get an insight into the job. That there is no harm in asking for help when coming to these applications.
Thank you. And lastly, I'll turn to Emanuele for some final words.
Well, to those of you who are still students, I know how hard it can be when you have to apply tracks. It's very daunting. It's very competitive. Sometimes you will have self-doubt, as I did, but what I can tell you, if you really want to get a training contract, if you really want to qualify as a solicitor, just keep applying. As Richard said, never give up. If you don't get it this round, you will get it next. Just keep doing it, and you will find yourself in a few years. You will wake up and you'll be a solicitor after a lot of work.
Very inspirational words to end on there. So that brings us to the end of the evening. So I would like to take this opportunity to thank all of our panelists for giving up their evening to attend tonight and answer all of your questions. So I hope that you found that helpful and that you found some real value in the answers that you've been given tonight. I'd like to thank everyone for attending tonight as well. and putting your questions across. Through yourselves attending and asking those questions that we're able to make nights like this possible. So thank you to all that have attended. We do have another session coming up in a few weeks' time. So on the 3rd of March, we'll have a similar session with a panel of barristers. So if you'd like to attend that, you can still sign up through the website. If you'd like to be notified of any of our future events, simply jump onto the contact page for our website, fill in your details, you'll be on the mailing list, and you can be notified of all future events. And for those of you that are in the advocacy club, I'll see you on Tuesday for our next session. If you're interested in advocacy and want to be able to practice in a sort of friendly, non-judgmental environment, have a look at the advocacy club page on our website, and all of the information is there. So as I say, that brings us to the end of the evening. Thank you to all that have been in attendance, and I'll see you again next time.